Welcome to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong, an unscripted podcast hosted by two exes who are now good friends. In this episode, Sean tells us why he had to throw two people out of his apartment building recently, and Josh recalls some of his scariest driving experiences. The discussion turns to the role of religion in society and what replaces it as other things take precedence. Enjoy the ride.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. In this podcast, you'll join me and Josh. That's Josh over there. We are two exes who are still really good friends, and we talk about everything from life, love, politics, pop culture, the Minogue sisters, although they haven't come up a lot recently, and anything else that takes our fancy. And we do it from a perspective that is quite unique to us because we were together for about 20 years and now we're still good friends, and that's our take on life. So thanks for joining us. How are you, Josh?
Yeah, I'm okay, Sean. I'm a bit tired because we were doing the queer open mic last night at the Cock Tavern in Kennington, and I think I slept enough, but I just find running those events quite exhausting. You know, I enjoy the adrenaline. And then when I get home, I'm still sort of like, you know, on a bit of a high from the adrenaline. But then the next day, I really feel the sort of the tiredness hit me. So I'm okay. I'm fine. I've also went for a run this morning, which makes me sound like such a wanker. But you know, so I'm okay. I'm okay.
Are you a runner?
Yeah, because I've been running for a week and a half, so I'm a runner.
But that getting home from Kennington to your place, how long did the drive take you last night?
It took about 45 minutes or something like that last night. Normally it's like half an hour or less, but the weather was wild. I don't know what your journey home was like, but the rain was just lashing down on the A4. It was pretty hair raising actually. The last stretch.
That's tiring as well, right? Like driving in that sort of weather.
Yeah. There was one point on the A4 when I was driving and the traffic coming the other way, there must have been a huge amount of rain on the road. At one point, this wall of water from the other side of the road just like hit me. I mean, it just completely obscured my vision. Probably not for very long, only like less than a second. But I was just like, shit, you know, like I just couldn't see. I couldn't see the road in front of me. And that was pretty hair raising.
Yeah, it was. I had to get the bus home, and then I had to go and stand at the bus stop in the rain, and it wasn't pleasant. The only upside was that it wasn't as cold as it had been previously, the few days before.
Yeah.
So the temperature was still about 15 or 16 degrees Celsius, which doesn't sound warm to a lot of people, but considering that a few days earlier it had been like 1 or 2 degrees,
Exactly.
or 0.
Well, when I went for my run this morning, because I'm a runner, I wore shorts because I checked the temperature and it was like 12 degrees at 7 o'clock this morning. So I was like, okay, well, yeah, it does. It feels balmy and it feels tropical.
So are you into running now? That's interesting.
Until I lose motivation. Yeah.
Who talks more incessantly about their interests, runners or vegans?
Oh, I don't know.
Vegan runners.
Vegan runners. You see,
there is a vegan running group.
I know. I saw when I was walking along the canal a few weeks ago. Someone ran past in a vegan runner's singlet.
Talking of dangerous driving and rain, do you remember that time we were driving down the Pacific? Is it the Pacific Coast Highway or the Pacific Highway in Australia? Pacific Highway. And we were in New South Wales, maybe the Central Coast area, I think. And the rain was so torrential that it was like bathtubs or swimming pools of water on the road. Like it was so wet.
Wild. It was wild.
And we had to stop and book into a hotel because there was no way to drive.
And I remember there was one stretch of road. It was somewhere near Coffs Harbour, I think. And there was one stretch of road where the rain was lashing down so hard that I couldn't even pull over because the visibility was so bad that I couldn't actually see what was at the side of the road. You know, it was quite a rural stretch of road and the rain was lashing down so hard and it was so dark. And the only thing I could do was just to like slow right down and try and follow like the white dividing line on the road,
Hmm.
because I couldn't pull off the road because I literally couldn't see if there was anywhere to pull over onto. It was terrifying. And then I think if it's the same time, or if I may be misremembering this or mixing memories together, but was that the same time when they were all like suddenly there were all these like frogs jumping across the road as well, just to like make it make it
I don't
even
remember
more
that.
distressing.
I
Um,
don't remember that. You're mixing that with the end of Magnolia. I don't remember that happening in my life.
yeah,
But
yeah.
what's the worst? Is that like the most dangerous driving conditions you've been in? What are some other like hair-raising car moments you've had with weather or dangerous driving conditions?
I think, well, there was that time we had that Nissan Micra, that tiny little, it was like a little tin can on wheels. Do you remember? And we were driving up to Scotland. I think probably for one of the Glasgow Vegan Beer Fest. I don't know what year that would have been, but and it was north of the Lake District. So what's that motorway? It's at the M5?
I don't know.
No, not the M5, M6. Anyway, whatever that motorway is that goes north of Manchester, it goes past the Lake District and then like heading up towards Carlisle, on the
Hmm.
on the Scottish border. And the wind was so strong, and that little tin can, even with us in it, two rather heavy guys, and all the sort of all the shit we had, all the paraphernalia we had in the back for the beer fest, the car would just it would just I'd be in a lane, and then like suddenly I'd be like 2 feet or 3 feet to the left. Like what's that, about a meter to the left or a meter to the right, because the wind was just like it was terrifying. And there were
That
all these.
car,
Hmm?
I was going to say that car certainly got battered over the years.
I know,
Um,
I know. We drove it up
what,
and up.
was that the car that you had when we drove? This is so embarrassing. We drove to Brighton because I wanted to see Gary Barlow in concert. Was that the same car?
No, that was
Oh, that was a
that
rental
was a
car.
rental. That was a
Or like
rental.
a replacement car because wasn't the car in the workshop or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But that
Uh,
car I remember driving and it was freezing cold and snowing and ice everywhere. It was
mm,
one of the coldest winters I remember.
mhm.
And we were going to see Gary Barlow in concert at the Brighton
In my
Centre.
defense, I just tagged along. I had no desire to see Gary Barlow.
I don't think I even did at that point, but it was I had bought the tickets while I still liked him, and then I didn't like him, and then it was like, well, it's too late. We're going,
It was a
and it
pretty
was
tragic concert, wasn't it? It was the
mm-hmm,
Brighton Centre, wasn't it?
yeah,
Was that what it's
Brighton
called?
Centre, and I can remember going out, being outside, trying to get into the venue, and it was so bitterly cold and windy down there,
Hmm.
and that was that trip when we were driving down there. You thought that everyone had a vendetta against you or they were all doing something to you, flashing their headlights at
So my
you.
persecution complex. Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
they were
didn't,
flashing their lights, and so looking back, I guess maybe my lights weren't on. Maybe
or you
because it was
had
a
them. Yeah.
I don't know, because it was a rental and I wasn't used to it. I mean, I thought, I don't know. I mean, that's all I can think now in the clear light of day.
I can remember like how paranoid you were about it. You were like, is this because this is a new car? Because it was like a loan car from and I think it was relatively new.
Oh
You were
yeah,
like, you were saying you think you've heard that there's an initiation that happens to new cars where people like
I
flash
don't
at
know.
people in new cars and try and run them off the road, and that it's something that happens, and you were getting really upset that this was happening to you because you were driving this new car.
Maybe it was a manifestation of my subconscious hatred for myself for going to a Gary Barlow concert, for being
Well,
talked into going to a Gary Barlow, and the concert was so bad. I mean, Gary. Okay, let's forget his politics for a minute. But, Gary is a good songwriter and quite a good singer. But the concert was just abysmal, and not only that, but it was like, it was a sad feeling, like they'd curtained off like 4/5 of the venue because they hadn't sold many tickets. It was just, yeah, it was, and there were lots of like vulnerable people there. It was just like it was not an
us,
enjoyable.
us included.
Yeah, well,
And then we
I didn't
drove
choose
back
to
the
go, but
same
that's
night,
not for
right?
here.
We didn't stay down there, and then we had to drive back. And the car was very small and flimsy, and you were really scared that people were flashing the lights at you in an initiation ritual that was going to turn deadly, like I Know What You Did Last Summer or something similar. And
Mm.
then you couldn't put the heating on because for some reason the car was fogging up and you couldn't see. So we had no heating on in the car, and it was like driving in an icebox.
I don't remember that. No, that
I
was no. You're misremembering. That
no, I
was on the way.
remember
No,
being
that was on the
freezing
no.
in that.
That was on the way back from going. And I mean, another. I mean, you think going down to Brighton for a gig and coming back the same night was ridiculous. We also went to see Gene in Cardiff when we lived in Chiswick. We drove to Cardiff to see Gene in concert, and then drove back that same night. It was me, you, and Monique, and
Mhm.
that was the trip you're thinking of, where the car. I don't. Was that? I don't think that was the Nissan Micra. Maybe that was the Volvo. No, I don't know. Anyway, whatever car it was. And you and Monique, like as soon as we got in, because you and Monique had been drinking at the gig. Obviously, I wasn't because I was driving. And then as soon as we got in the car on the way home, you and Monique fell asleep instantly. And then like I think Monique was in the front, you were in the back, and she kept on like cranking the heat up, and then like she'd fall asleep, and I would have to like turn it down because the windscreen was fogging up, and I couldn't
Mhm.
see, and so I had to like turn it down to like, I mean, I don't know how it works actually. I don't know if you have to try and match the outside temperature, or I don't know how it works, but anyway, so that I think is what the incident you're thinking of.
But I also remember being very cold driving to see Gary Barlow and not being allowed to put the heating on for some reason.
I
Like
don't
that
know.
was,
I don't remember
I
that.
can remember it being icy cold.
Hmm.
Um, but then the other time that was a bit dangerous was when we were with Michelle and Kale and we were driving over those mountains in the US, and we had to stop to get the chains for the wheels,
Oh yeah,
the tires.
the Donner Pass. Wasn't it the
Donna?
Donner Pass? Donner, Donner?
Yeah.
Wasn't it
Isn't
Donner
that the
Pass?
Donna party where some of them ate each other or
Yeah,
something?
yeah. It was when they were hiking. That's why it's called the Donner Pass, because they turned into. Well, I don't know if it was ever substantiated, but they allegedly turned into cannibals. Um, but yeah, that's Northern California, isn't it? As you're going over the mountains into Nevada,
Do you
and
turn to cannibalism, or do you turn into a cannibal, or do you realize your cannibalism? Are we all cannibals at heart? And
I
it's
don't
only
know.
just we haven't been put in a situation to.
But you turn to, it's like you turn to something. You turn to drugs, or you turn to alcohol, you turn to cannibalism.
Well, if we finish talking about turn driving shenanigans, I can talk about things people turn to, and I just got angry. And you can tell me if I'm overreacting. Tell
Okay.
me where I'm going wrong, if you will. But I live in an apartment block, like you know, which is about 16 stories high, and you need to be either buzzed in or you need to come in with a key fob. You can't just come into the building. I was here earlier this morning, and my door, internal door buzzer rang. So I opened it, and there were two people stood there and said, "Hello, you might be wondering what we're doing here." And I said, "Yeah, I am. Like, I didn't hear you ring the front of the building." And they said, "We're here to tell you about a website called jw.org."
Oh
And
God. Okay.
I said, "You do not have permission to be in this building, do you?" And they said, "Well, no, we don't have written permission." And I said, "Do you have verbal permission?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Well, you need to leave." And they said, "Oh, well, we just want to tell you about this website." And I said, "Well, before we have any discussion about why you're here, I just want to know, how did you get into the building?" And they said, "Oh, we rang the trade, like there's a bell for trade
Yeah.
entry, like
Trades. Yeah.
tradespeople." And I said, "Well, you're not tradespeople, are you?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Well, that was disingenuous of you getting into the building that way."
That was
And
against the teachings of God, no?
well, I don't know what their teachings believe, the Jehovah's Witness, but I said, so you need to leave the building now, and I'm just going to call security to make sure that you leave.
Mm.
And they were like, oh, like all offended. And so I came back in, I got my coat on, and I went out and I followed them downstairs and made them leave. And then I went to the security office and I said, these people were here and they shouldn't have been. And they would
Mm.
say, yeah, you're right, they shouldn't have been here.
Mm.
And I was very indignant. But do you think it's fair of me to kick them out, or should I have let them just go about their business knocking on
No,
all the doors
they
in the building?
shouldn't. They shouldn't, I mean, religion is a personal choice, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody is entitled to believe what they like. But to infringe on people's privacy like that, and to be in a space which is supposed to be secure, where they shouldn't
Yep.
have been, is not okay. It's different if you lived in a house which had an external door to the
Yep.
street. Although, I would tell them to leave straight away. But yeah, I think you were perfectly within your rights. I think it was the right thing to do. Um, it
Yeah.
remind
It just offends me that they think that their need or desire or right to uh, extol the benefits of their religion
Hmm.
give them the right to come into a building that is a private building
Yeah,
with a
I find it really, really irritating. How you have people just screaming, especially in Camden, for some reason outside Camden Town Tube Station, people screaming on the streets into microphones about God and about, religious teachings. And it's, you know, it's hard to find the words because I just find it so distasteful to try and
yeah.
shove stuff like that in down your throat. It's a very personal thing, and you and I differ very much in our thoughts around spirituality, but it is for me very much a personal choice and something which I don't sort of try and impress on other people. Everyone is entitled to make their own mind up. But I find that sort of that religious, what's the word? Not prosthetics, religious proselytizing. No, do you know that
Yeah,
word?
I don't know the word. No.
I find that really, really distasteful. So yeah, I think you did the right thing. It reminded me, as you were saying that, it reminded me of. Do you remember when I was running a study abroad program for American students, and I took the students. I can't remember. We were somewhere in East London. We were on that Hammersmith and City line,
Mm-hmm.
just near Liverpool Street Station, and we got off the train. I still can't remember where we were going, but we got off the train, and one of the students was like, "Oh no, I've left my phone on the train." So we reported it, but I said, you probably won't see that phone again. But and then was it 2 days later? I said the student came into the office, and I said, well, let's try the phone, let's try the number, and see if anyone picks up. And so I did, and this man answered, and he was, I don't know, there was just something about him that I couldn't quite, something odd about his response, his behavior. And he was like, "Oh yes, I found the phone on the train, and tell me where you are. I'll come and I'll drop it off for you." And I said, "Well, no." I said, "We can come to you. That's really kind of you. Thank you. We can come to you."
Mm-hmm.
And he was really insistent, and he said, "No, no, no. I'll come to you." And I was like, "No, really, you don't have to." And then anyway, and I said, well, we're in, Gloucester Road in West London, Kensington. And he said, "Oh, yep, no problem. I'll be there in an hour." And he called, an hour later, and he said, "I'm outside." And I said to the student, "Look, you stay here. I'll go down because I'm not going to send you off to meet a stranger." And I
Yeah.
went down and I said to them, because I'd said to the man, that's right, I'd said to him when we'd spoken on the phone, do you drink? Can I get you like a bottle of wine or something to say thanks?" He's like, "No, no, I don't drink." So I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just give him like a little bit of cash or something as a thank you. And so he was in the car, and I went up and I said, "Oh, are you so and so?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, thanks so much. It's really kind of you." And he said, "Oh, it's no problem, no problem." And I tried to give him this envelope, and he was like, "No, no, no, I won't take anything. I won't take anything." But he handed me this plastic bag, and then I said thanks, and then I took the bag up to the office to the student, and we opened it, and the phone was in there, but there was also a leaflet, and I don't know what religion it was. It was some Christian, some branch of Christianity, and it was, oh, you have just been. I wish I could remember the wording of it, but it was something like you've just been touched by God, or God has just done you a good deed, or something.
Yeah.
And I thought, are people like, are people like going around finding lost phones just so that they can make it a manifestation of God's goodwill or something? It's really,
Yeah. Do you remember,
it's,
was it that place when we were recently in Ireland on holiday, and there was all that God stuff all through the Airbnb we were in?
yeah,
Like in the
yeah.
front room, like where they would normally have information about,
It
you
was
know,
in Derry, London,
and
Derry.
then, in where they might have information about the Wi-Fi or local things to see, they also had information about Jesus and God, and there were pamphlets in the bedrooms, and
Yeah, yeah,
I find that really distasteful as well.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
why?
Do you remember
Why?
when? Oh, what were we going to say?
No, you go, you go.
So do you remember when we were in Whole Foods in California in Rolling Hills Plaza? I think I don't know. Were we going to meet Patricia? Or, I don't know. We were in the Whole Foods in like I don't know if Whole Foods really have it anymore, but they used to have a sort of seating area where you could sit and eat their food, from the hot food counter.
Yeah,
And we were sitting there, and do you remember there was a woman, and she wasn't in a wheelchair. She was in a those sort of
mobility.
like those walkers that also have a little seat. Like I don't
Yes,
know, like in my aunt in the Netherlands calls them rollator, but that might just be a Dutch thing. I don't know. But yeah, they're just like a glorified sort of shopping trolley, but
yeah,
they also have a little seat on. And I think she was just sat in that resting. Do you remember those two young women came in
yeah.
and they just had the energy of like lunatics, and they were like, I'm not going to try and do my bad American accent, but
No,
she
don't do
just
that.
went up to this woman who was sitting on her sort of scooter thing, and she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I found you. We were driving here, and I had a message from God that I was to come here and to help a woman in a wheelchair, and I'm here just to like remind you that God is watching, God is good, God is
No, she
helping."
said she said God asked me to come in and pray over you,
That's right.
right? And they tried to do a prayer with this person.
And it's just like, fuck off. Like, fuck the fuck off. Like, it just makes me so annoyed.
Yeah.
Um,
How do that practice of, remember when we used to go and stay, well, I suppose in hotels all around the world, but mostly in the US, why were there Bibles in the bedside tables of motels and hotels? Like, how did that become a normal thing to do?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I don't know, because Marriott, like the Marriott Hotel Group, is owned by a religious organization.
Obviously.
Yeah. And so I don't know if it started with that, maybe, that in all Marriott hotels and all of its subsidiaries as well, perhaps they had the Bible, but I don't know. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how much it still holds true today.
I think it's still in some, you don't see it as much anymore, but it
I mean, you don't
probably,
really see it outside of the US, do you?
well, I think it used to be in Australia. I
Really?
think it, yeah, but yeah, it seems such a bizarre thing to do. Like, and I wonder what the motivation for putting it there was. Like, was it to try and convert people? Was it to try and, I don't know, if somebody had booked the hotel room for an extramarital affair, would it make them think twice? Like, if you were going to do something that was deemed,
Or was it just simply, so that when you were away from home, was it a more sort of benign assumption that most people are Christian, and that when you're away from home, you might want to have the Bible there to refresh your memory? I don't know.
yeah. Have you ever read any of the Christian Bible?
No, no. Have you?
I, yeah, I've read little bits of it. Um, it's just when I was a kid, I suppose, out of interest. Like, and
Well,
yet
like
people
Old
always,
Testament or New Testament?
I don't know the difference. Like, I don't know the difference, but I can remember there were always just Bibles being thrown at you. You know, like it's the sort of thing where people would give you a Bible if you went to like a school event on the school holidays, you know, like a kids event on the school holidays run by some local community group. Somehow some religion would weasel their way in and
See,
somehow give you a
I don't
Bible.
think we were exposed to that as much in well, not in London, maybe in other parts of the UK in the 70s and 80s. I mean, Australia, particularly where you grew up in Queensland, it it was a very sort of old-fashioned, behind the times kind of place. So I can see how in Australia that would be the case, but I feel like in London, it that we didn't really get exposed to it much at all.
But I can remember there were a lot of TV evangelist infomercials on TV in Australia in the 80s,
No,
but
really.
they were all mostly from the US. Like we didn't have, you know, super preachers or like these evangelist preachers in Australia at the time. And so we would watch these infomercials and I would just watch them for entertainment. Like I didn't really believe in God even as a kid.
Hmm.
And I didn't, but I can remember once they put it on the TV, write to us at this address and we will send you, I can't remember if it was a crucifix or a Bible. And it was an address in the US. And I did it as a kid, just out of boredom. I wrote to it. And then like weeks and weeks and weeks later, I got this gift back from the US. It was like a Bible or a crucifix or something. And I just thought it was hilarious that I was able to get something free from writing to these people.
Hmm.
So I think I tried, I don't know, I found a Bible or I stole one from a charity shop or something. And I tried to read parts of it out of interest, just my interest in literature. And I just found it not that engaging. Like I was like,
Hmm.
what am I meant to be reading here?
Hmm.
But how about these people who like memorize the Bible? There's a whole TikTok trend of parents quizzing their kids around the dinner table or wherever. Like they'll say the number of the what are the different parts of the Bible called? Like the
Chapter and verse, no?
chapters and verse. They'll say a chapter and verse number, and then the kids have to recite it. And you know,
Hmm.
just so creepy. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, um, it's probably a good brain development sort of exercise.
It's good brain development, but not good critical thinking development.
No, no, no.
And have you ever been to church? Like, did you ever go when you were a kid with your parents?
No, no. I grew up. I mean, it's funny because, my dad's side, my grandparents were Jewish, and then they converted to, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, maybe
Yeah.
my granddad
Mhm.
converted to become a minister at the Church of Scotland. But I think by the time my dad and my aunt, they were raised in a semi-religious sort of household. But then by the time it got to me, there was no religion really. I mean, at school, I think we had to like a couple of times a year we would have to go to a church and pray. I don't know. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Did you have you ever dated or had a close friend who was super religious?
Well, define super religious.
Like someone who's really into it, like really fucking into religion. Like,
Well, yeah. We have a mutual friend in LA who's religious, a member of a church.
yeah.
Um, we've stayed
But I
with her
mean,
before. She stayed with us here in London.
but I mean, what about like in a more intimate? Like, have you ever dated someone who was really religious?
No, no. Uh,
I once went on a date with a guy in Sydney. This is many 25, 30. I don't even know how many years ago it was.
hmm,
And we met and he said, "Oh, would you like to come to my house for dinner?" Which I felt was a bit of a weird thing.
hmm.
Like that's not really something you would do on a first date, is it? Like as a young gay person in Sydney, like it wasn't really like come to my house and I'll cook you dinner. Like you'd normally go to a bar or
Where
something.
did you meet?
We met in a bar. I mean, this
Okay.
is pre phones or pre
Yeah, I was
apps
going to
and
say,
stuff,
like,
you
it
know.
wouldn't have been Grinder
So
back
we
in.
probably met met in a bar, and then he was like, "Oh,
What, that same night, come to dinner at my
no,
place?
no,
Or...
no, no!" Like a week later, would you like to come?
Ah,
And it would have been like we only had like landlines to call people on and stuff like that. Like it wasn't even, you couldn't even email people really. It wasn't even that common to email people. And God, times have changed so much, haven't they? Like how we used to communicate with people.
mm-hmm.
But anyway, he invited me. He lived near Newtown, and it was when I was living in Alexandria with Stephen and Vanessa.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to this guy's house, and he made, I forget what he made. And it was before I was vegan, but I was vegetarian. So I can't remember what he made. But in the middle of his living room / dining room was, like a plinth in like a museum,
Mm-hmm.
and it had a glass cube on top of it. And inside the glass cube was a Bible open.
Okay,
I was like, what?
that's quite extreme.
And I was like, what's this? And he goes, oh, that's my Bible. And I was like, oh, okay. Why is it open? He goes, oh, every now and then I open it to like a chapter or a verse or a passage or whatever that is meaningful to me at that time, so I can read it as I pass it. And I was just like, oh, get me out of here. Like this is some sort of lunatic situation. Like, but, I don't mean to be disrespectful of people's religious beliefs, but to me, that is unusual behavior.
Well, I think, I think it's a sign, perhaps. I'm a bit hesitant to say it, but I'll say it anyway. For all of our 50 listeners, I think I think sometimes, and I don't want this to be sound disparaging to anyone. It's not. I think, religion can be a wonderful thing for people. I think, but I do think it's a very personal, private thing. But I think sometimes when you have people who are very overtly religious, it's a sign of perhaps some mental health issues. And it doesn't have to be religion. It can be other things as well. It's like when you get people who obsess about aliens or, even like I see it a lot in the vegan world as well.
Yeah.
You get people who, for whatever reason, whether it's mental health struggles, if it's psychological conditions, whether it's, just life, their personality disorder, I don't know what, as I've said many times, I'm not a psychiatrist, but they struggle to find a place in the world, and they struggle to find a community or a set of values to which they can belong. And then along comes something like religion, veganism, alien conspiracies, and suddenly they feel like they've found something which gives them that sense of, I don't know, belonging and validation.
Well, I think veganism is a little bit different, but I do take your point. Like it can attract people who are prone to falling down rabbit holes or extremism.
Yeah.
But anything can, right? Like people can attach themselves to anything.
Just
Like
going to sit my water to the side so that you don't shame me for the paint that's fallen off the bottom of my water bottle.
So, yeah, people can become obsessive about most topics.
Do you remember? We have to be careful, I suppose, from legal things. But there was a person in Brisbane who was running a vegan street food business.
Well, this is already pretty much, if they were listening, they probably know who we're talking about.
Yeah, but we're not going to talk any more specifically about what kind of business it was. But do you remember they stopped running that business, and then they joined that. I don't even know if we can mention. Is it a religion? Do you know what I'm talking about, right?
No, well, you'll have to say it.
I feel like I can't even I shouldn't mention it because I can't fully explain it because I don't really understand it. But the Raelians, and remember the Raelian headquarters was on our street.
A cult. You can say it's a cult.
But is it a religious cult? Is it a
spiritual cult?
A spiritual cult? Like what? What classification do you give it?
So Raelians
How do you spell
Raelian,
it? How do you even spell Raelian?
Rael. Rael is the person
Right. Okay.
who was the leader of the cult.
Now
And
that we going to be like, will this be our last broadcast? Are we going to be like, are we going to die in suspicious circumstances?
no, no, we won't, because Rael equals love, as the
Oh, right.
teachings go.
Okay.
But I'm really fascinated by. Have you watched the documentary series on Rail?
Mm-mm.
Oh, so good. You've got to watch it. I don't know if it's on Netflix, but it's yeah, it tells the story of Rail, and the teachings from Rail was that we came as humanoids from UFOs that I think used volcanoes as like landing areas on Earth, and we came from them in full sort of humanoid form. We didn't evolve from, primates or anything like that. And they were the people that, do you remember in the 90s, they said they were the first organization to clone a human? Do you remember
That
that big
that does
drama?
ring that does ring a distant bell.
And they
Yeah.
even went to like the UN or somewhere and did a press conference where they said, we've created a human. And it was this huge, huge drama. And then they got all up in arms. They got everyone upset in the US, like all the fundamental Christians upset that this shouldn't be happening. And it turned out all to be a hoax and fake, because, you can't clone a human.
What was their reason for doing it? Was it just for exposure, just for
Yeah,
the attention?
they used to do all attention seeking stunts, and they had like I don't know. You watch this documentary series; it's very fascinating.
Okay.
But yeah, where we lived for a short while on, what was the name of that street in
Was
Highgate
in
Hill?
Highgate Hill. I can't remember what street that was, but yeah, it was the local headquarters was on
Yeah,
the
it was
street,
just in a
wasn't it?
flat in a block of apartments. One of them was where the Raelians were, so you could see their posters and stuff all crammed up inside the apartment, and they bring them out. And they used to come down and be at the gay pride, like the queer pride
Yeah, I was
parade.
going to say I remember one of the Brisbane prides that
And
they
they,
were
and they
at.
weren't they were like pro gay and pro gay marriage, and they were all like, because Rail was love and Rail was freedom, and everyone could love who they want. And it was all the same pedo shit where it would be like fucking Rail was like sleeping with young girls and had 20 wives and all this stuff, like all these cult leaders always do.
Hmm.
And but yeah, for some reason, cults, I think we've talked about this before on the pod as well, like cults seem to get a real foothold in Australia. I
Well, I
don't
was
know
just going to
why.
say, like, I mean, it could just be circumstantial. I don't ever recall coming across Raelianism anywhere else in the world, but in Brisbane,
Well,
Australia. And is that,
well, I think that's probably because we saw them at the Pride Day, and
hmm,
that we also realized they lived. We realized that they lived on our street as well, and
hmm.
so we just thought about it a lot. And
But have you
uh,
seen them? Have you seen their presence anywhere else in the world?
no, but if you watch this documentary, they were Raelians everywhere. Like they were a really big movement all through Asia, like Europe, North
Hmm.
America. I, yeah, I'm fascinated by
And like
the
again,
Raelians.
I'm not gonna going back to what we were talking about before though. I'm not gonna mention this person's name either. But there was another person that we went on a sort of day trip with, a vegan day trip thing. Which sounds odd, but anyway. Um, and they were of that similar kind of ilk, like I think, had a lot of mental health issues, and they became really um what's the word, like like not evangelistic, but like really overly zealous about veganism, really like obsessive to the nth degree. And then a couple of years later they weren't vegan anymore, they'd moved on to something else. And that's what I'm saying, like it's like that
I don't know who you're
really
talking about then, but
um
also
flat earth, I'll just say flat earth
flat
to give
Earth.
you a clue. Anyway,
Oh yeah, I mean, we could talk about him.
You're in therapy.
Well, now that you've said all that, anyone would just
Well, we can't mention them by name.
people would just Google urine therapy flat earth vegan, and that person would be the first person to come up. So you've kind of given it away.
Maybe, I don't know. I haven't Googled their online presence in
Then
recent years.
remember, you had a friend who was a follower of the Supreme Master.
Yeah. A colleague, I would say, more than a friend.
Well,
Yeah.
they were an associate, like a, what do you call it? Like a,
Don't know.
when you know someone, but you're not super good friends with them, but an acquaintance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were like an acquaintance. And then
Yeah.
there was somebody else that I went to university with who was also a follower of
Oh, yeah. That's right.
the Supreme Master.
Yeah.
And Supreme Master Ching Hai is I suppose, the leader, even though she says she doesn't like that term, like the spiritual leader of a movement.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about teaching, I don't know, like peace and purity and stuff, but it's a cult, and it is very problematic, but it's probably one of the lesser problematic cults. You know, they're not killing people, and I don't think there have been like suggestions of like child brides or anything like that. But
Well,
there are
it's
other
run by a
problematic
woman, you know, not to generalize, but like normally 9 times out of 10, I feel like if a cult is run by a man, then there's bound to be some sort of like nefarious, you know, exploitation going on. And most cults, I feel like most cults are run by men anyway. Like,
And one of these people that we know who was a follower of, when I was asking them about Ching Hai, and I asked them a question about Ching Hai, when they would answer me, they would say, "Yes, my master says this," or "My master," and that's just weird to me. Like that's, you know,
this is it. This is it. I think it speaks to a need to defer. You know, and this is a broader problem in society. This is, I think we've talked about this on a podcast before. This is why we look to people. We look to spokespeople, whether they're politicians or celebrities, people we see on TV. You know, we look to people to give us answers rather than searching for them ourselves. We look to people to tell us what we should believe in, or to tell us what we should think, to tell us what we should be critical of, or what values we should hold up, rather than work them out for ourselves, because it's you know, maybe we're genetically sort of preconditioned to that. Maybe that's a thing common to all of the great apes, you know, that we to form some kind of societal bond, we have to have some deference to a higher, I don't know, higher person, higher power.
Yeah, maybe when your brain gets to a certain level of development, and it starts to, like, you start to live with reason and logic, your brain tries to make sense of things that are just mysteries or like unexplainable. And so we look to things like organized religion or belief systems to try and stop ourselves from going crazy from, you know, lack of structure or lack of logic.
Yeah.
In a very chaotic universe.
And I think what's scary to me, and I'm not for 1 second saying we should all go back to religion being the thing that we adhere to as a society, but I think in the absence of religion, we are just deferring to capitalism and consumerism, and that's no good.
Some people, political affiliations.
Yeah, but politics is so closely tied to capitalism as well. Like there's no modern politics appears to be much more closely tied to capitalism and consumerism than perhaps it should be, because I mean politics should really be about the betterment of society and the creation of a better future for not just our community but for a global community, but it's not. And it is about keeping people financially secure enough to keep them voting for you.
Yeah.
And, you know, it is really, you know, I don't know what the answer is, but in with the drop off in people subscribing to any religion, I do feel like we need some sort of replacement that isn't based purely on economics.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the answer is. I'll have to defer to a higher power.
Yeah. I
And
I grew up in a pretty non-religious I don't know, home scenario, series of homes, but my extended family were all Catholic,
mm,
and it just seemed like not it just seemed unnecessarily controlling and restrictive with no benefits. That's how I remember organized religion from my youth. Like it
mm,
just no, it seemed everyone was miserable. Everyone was either abused or abusing someone. Everyone was upset or angry. Everyone was suffering. Nobody had any money.
mm.
And they were all trying to make each other feel bad about it based on religious teachings. It just seemed like nonsense.
Well, I mean, it's religion has been used, hasn't it, over the centuries to, in some ways, uh, provide comfort for those who are struggling. You know,
Mm.
it's the more pain you suffer in this life, the more likely you'll get into heaven or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I say this as if I have personal experience with it, which I don't. But I think also it's a way of oppressing people. It's been used as a way of oppressing people to say, well, you know,
Yeah.
you should suffer um, because that's what, you know, you're here on earth to do. But and that's why I feel like now we've swung so drastically to the opposite sort of way of looking at things, and we frame things on a much more individual level now, like what's the best thing for me, and maybe that's better, but I'm not sure because this sort of promotion of the self and individualism is not good for
It
the
doesn't have
planet.
to. It doesn't have to be individualism or religion. There can be other ways. Like there can be other
Yeah,
ways
but
of communal, like salvation. You know, like there can be, like when I was at the open mic last night, and I was talking to Farika, who is the owner of the venue where we host the queer open mic. So
hmm,
the venue is called the Cock Tavern, and it's in Kennington. That's a gay bar, and Farika is a really well known personality, and I'm sort of, I suppose, community leader in
hmm,
the queer community. She has run different venues across decades in London. She was talking to me about the importance of surrounding yourself with people. So if you're creating like spaces, like queer spaces or queer friendly spaces or
hmm.
community spaces, to surround yourself with people who not not really to do with money, but who can help you in your mission to do those things. So, who will either take part in them, or
Hmm.
who will celebrate you, or will tell people about what you're doing, or who will be part of it and come along and be a
Well,
participant.
that's like, you know, I suppose the term social capital is the best,
Yeah.
you know, best way of describing that. Yeah, like we build something which doesn't benefit us financially.
Hmm.
It benefits us because we create something that can be enjoyed by other people as well. And
Yeah.
it supports and provides entertainment and enjoyment and comfort for other people. And that, you know, social capital is probably, you know, it's a flawed term in that it still buys into that, you know, the naming of something as capital
Yeah.
when
I mean, is
they're
there a different term we can use then for that? Like
yeah, I don't know, social, um, yeah, well,
cohesion?
yeah, social benefit, but I don't know.
Yeah, but
But
you know,
yeah,
like I've been involved with alongside you, but I've been involved in running community events and community sort of aimed events for 15 years or so in London,
mm,
and I do see the benefit. And I hear people say to me, "Hey, this has been a really special experience for me," or "I've met people," or "I've met my partner at your event," or "It gives me someone to go because I don't know any other vegans or I don't know other queer people to hang out with."
mm,
But I do have to say, like, it's hard to do that sort of stuff when we are so surrounded and wrapped up in a capitalist system. So
Mm.
you can, unless you monetize things, you're doing all this at your own expense, whether that be money or time or effort. You're doing it at
Mm.
your own expense. And then you're also expected to pay extortionate rents and pay your
Yeah,
bills and
yeah.
pay your
This
medical
is it.
bills.
Like, I would love nothing more than to just, um, create amazing spaces, events, but yeah, like I have bills I need to pay, and I still, I want to go and I like traveling. Um, I like acquiring new plants, and all of these things obviously take money. It costs money
Yeah.
to live in a capitalist society. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's frustrating that we we cannot opt out of capitalism completely as much as we would like to.
And you've got to have things in life to live in this society. You
Mm.
can't sit in a shell with no refrigerator and no computer and just exist. Like, because then how would you
Well,
organize
you
if you didn't have
can, but
people?
you could, I suppose. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
but they're like,
But
if
it
you were going
would.
to organize for social cohesion, how would you
Mm.
do that without a smartphone or a computer?
Yeah, yeah.
How would you get the message out to people?
Hmm.
Like, how would you look after yourself? How would you pay your bills? Like,
Mm.
there are what bills and things that we need to do, like life administration, that requires technology now. There's
Hmm.
no other way around it. Um, it's very hard to do stuff for the benefit of humankind while also partaking in a system that oppresses humankind.
Yeah, yeah. I know, and it can really drive you to distraction. When you think about things. I mean, my phone is old. I've got an iPhone. It's old. It's pretty crap, and I need to get a new phone. And
Mm.
I was looking at, I've been looking at the Fairphone,
Yeah.
for listeners that haven't heard of it, it's a company who decided that to sort of counter the monopoly that Apple had on the market and other, not just Apple, but all these big phone manufacturers who were exploiting workers, who were using unsustainable resources to build their technology, making them building them with a shelf life, or building them in a way that meant that after a few years they would need to be replaced, or if one component of the phone breaks, you'd have to get a whole new phone
Hmm.
that you can't. And so Fairphone, I think they've had several models now. I don't know what number they're up to, but they keep improving on their sort of phone where, if the battery needs replacing, it can be replaced. If some, I don't know, the technical features of the phone fail, they can, in most cases, be replaced. And so not only is it, from a consumer point of view, better financially, excuse me, it is better from an environmental point of view, and they
Yeah.
don't use a lot of those sort of precious metals that are mined by children in other parts of the world and exploited. So it's a very righteous endeavor. But of course, I look at that and I think, well, I really like that, but it's not cheap. But neither is a new iPhone. But
Hmm.
it's just, I suppose, the ease of having an iPhone sync with everything else
Hmm.
in your life. And I mean, as I say it out loud, that just sounds like such a poor reason to not do something. So
Like,
maybe I
yeah,
need to
a
just,
slight inconvenience. Oh, no, I
yeah,
can't do that.
yeah. So maybe I
Yeah.
need to actually, now that I say it out loud on the pod, maybe I need to just, just
But I
say
mean,
good.
what about things like Spotify, Apple Music? You wouldn't be able to use those on a
Yeah, yeah,
Fairphone,
yeah.
or
Oh, yeah. You can use all of those. Yeah.
well, I can't think of a reason if you're in a position to afford it and you're in a position to make the change, why you wouldn't make a better choice. I mean, that's why
Mm,
we should all do things like that, right? When we can, like
mm,
it's the people who can afford to do this stuff that should wear the burden of it,
mm,
and not like then try and cast aspersions or judge people who can't afford to.
mm.
Like if you've only got £4 to spend on a new T-shirt and you have to go to Primark to buy it, that's a different story than if you've actually got disposable income but you still choose to go to Primark.
Yeah, yeah.
It's there are choices that, people are forced to make because of their financial situation. I just to change topic a little bit, we seem to talk a lot about religion on here, don't we? And how annoying it is, or
Well, I think we're in a period of history that I don't think we fully understand. I think perhaps future generations will look back on this period of history and see it as a really pivotal shift from a predominantly religious society. And I'm talking, just about places like the UK, Australia, the
yeah,
US, where, I mean, I would imagine the vast majority, 50 years ago, I would say the vast majority of people in all of those countries I just mentioned would have said they were religious and would have
yeah,
been practicing religion.
yeah.
And we've shifted to a very, very different world. And
When I was in the 70s and 80s growing up in Australia, I didn't know any religious people. I
no,
mean, I obviously knew religious people, but what I mean is people that I would hang out with or was friends with, nobody
but
was religious.
well, I think, Generation X, Generation Next, was perhaps the first generation to grow up though in a situation like that, because even 10 years before that, in the 60s, I think it would have been very different. I mean, obviously there would have been people who would shun religion. Like there was obviously the big hippie movement in the 60s, but they weren't the majority by any stretch. I would say the
I
majority
suppose
of
my generation then was the first to sort of be brought up without religion,
exactly, yeah.
sort of enforced on them by their parents. So if you had a big cultural shift in the 60s,
Hmm.
then those people started having children in the 70s and the late 70s, and then religion wasn't seen as important.
Yeah,
It's weird. It's true what you say about like the demise of religion, or the diminishment of religion. Is that a word? Diminishment is
I think so.
is sort of, you can really align it or correlate it with the hyper rise of commercialization and capitalism, like in the late 70s,
And
80s, and then
technology as
90s.
well, the
Yeah,
rise in technology and the integration of technology. And you think for thousands of years, religion played such a central part in, I would say, all societies across the world, except maybe, I don't know, maybe some very isolated ones. I would say religion played a very, very, like a fundamental part in society, more important than anything else, really. And that's changed
yeah,
so quickly in just a couple of decades. That's
yeah,
that's gone, not entirely, but almost entirely. And so, yeah, I think in the future people will look back on this period of human history and just, it will be a very, I mean, who knows where we're heading, now that we don't have God to guide us. Who knows where we'll be heading? Maybe humans will be extinct in 100 years. It feels like that at the moment.
yeah,
Feels like we'll be
possibly.
extinct in about 5 months at the moment.
I mean, we're about to wrap up, but I did want to just mention something, and I don't know if you are aware of this news, but I don't want to say a bad person's name. We won't do the thing we did last time
Oh
where
my
we
God, the
did
anagram thing
anagram.
last week. Please,
So what
no.
I'm going to say is I'm going to quickly say a few people's names in a row that I like, and then say this person's name, and hopefully that'll mess with the algorithm of YouTube or whatever that picks out these names. So
Okay.
let's say Dolly Parton, Bell Hooks, Kylie Minogue, Lady Gaga,
Oh yeah, we had to mention the Minogues. Danny Minogue.
Carly Rae Jepsen, a few other people, and I also will mention Matt Gaetz,
All right.
who is a politician in the US. Have you seen the news, the really weird news about how he was being nominated for Attorney General
Mm-hmm.
in the Trump administration?
So you
So,
mentioned that you mentioned the name.
oh, well, there you go. I can't. Well, I could have just been saying the verb to be trumped.
Yes. Well,
Um,
it's Dump. His name is Dump.
and in that dump administration, and so Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress,
Mm-hmm.
and then 24 hours later revoked his own putting himself forward for Attorney General
Hmm.
and is now on Cameo, selling Cameo videos because he can't go back to Congress because he quit. And there's all this weird stuff going on. Like, he was like, there's an investigation into him being a human trafficker. And this investigation has been going on a long time. And the state of US politics, I know it's something we've talked about a lot on here, but the ludicrous circus of being a congressperson, quitting because you're going to be attorney general, and then 24 hours later you're making on-demand Cameo videos for people to
It's
like shout out about.
circus. Circus is the right word. It's a circus led by clowns, and it's just, yeah, it's terrifying. Really
And, and
terrifying.
I and I just would like, it just got me thinking again. I know we probably don't have time to go into this because it's such a deep topic, but that whole idea that people are willing to vote for people who are sexual predators
Hmm.
or sexual abusers, or in this
Well,
case, possibly alleged human traffickers, for I can't imagine getting into that state of mind that you would knowingly vote for an individual who had done those things.
well, I mean, if you were willing to vote for Dump, then I think your powers of logic and rational thinking are perhaps not at their peak. I mean, that sounds really derogatory, and I don't mean it to be. I genuinely think that I don't know. So yeah, maybe it's too much of a topic to get into. But what I was going to say was that person whose name you mentioned, he wasn't the only person to be nominated by Dump to be, in the sort of the cabinet or whatever the equivalent is, who
Mm.
is under investigation for child sex offences.
Or other sorts of sexual offences as well.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah,
it's just like what, like, yeah,
it almost
well,
feels like Dump is trying to take the heat off their own culpability for history of sexual assault by surrounding
yeah,
themselves with
yeah,
other people of the same ilk. So people, it
normalizing
just
it.
normalizes it.
Yeah,
Anyway, it's just been on my mind this week about these people. Like, it's just, I don't know this, and these are people who will be responsible for dictating foreign policy of the US that directly impacts all of our well-being.
yeah, and
So
upholding the rule of law in society.
yeah,
It's terrifying. Before we wrap up, why have you moved house? Why are you in a different location? So, if for those of you who are listening to this, not watching, Sean is in a different location to normal.
I'm in a different room. So I'm in my bedroom. I'm normally in my dining room, which you can just see through there. But we have some house guests visiting from Mexico, and there's a mattress on the floor, like a bed on the floor, and their
Right.
belongings there. So I can't really move it around like I do to film in front of the plants and the stereo.
Okay.
So I'm here. You can see all of my junk on my desk
I
behind
can
me.
see, I think, a picture of Björk. Is
Where?
that Björk over your right shoulder?
Here?
No, is that your left shoulder? Yeah, there. No, just lower.
Oh yeah, yeah, down
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, there's Björk, and then up here there's a vampire,
Hmm.
a Dracula, and in there I just dropped the microphone,
Mic drop.
and then next to it is, what is it? It's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
Okay, okay.
So,
Thanks
and
for
then
that.
there's just all junk. You know when you get something like a desk in your bedroom and it just becomes a receptacle of absolute bullshit.
No,
Like,
no idea what you're talking about.
you just pile stuff on. You think, oh, well, I'll use that one day, or that looks cute, or I don't want to throw that out yet. And you
Hmm.
just pile and pile and pile stuff up. I hate living like that. It's just,
Well,
ugh.
it's that classic ADHD thing of you can't put it away. If there's something you need to action, you know that you can't put it away because if you put it away, you'll never look at it again. So
Oh,
you
I
you
have.
leave it out.
Do you know how the co-op supermarket used to give you money that you could then redeem? They don't do it anymore. They just now give you discounts on certain items. But I had built up, I think, about £14 that I'm allowed to spend. And I have a letter from them from last week that said, we're doing away with this. Well, we stopped you earning money a year ago, but we're actually going to take away the money you earn unless you spend it by the end of December. And so I've got a letter on the desk. And if I throw the letter away or recycle it, I won't remember to spend that money. But it just sits there, and I can't explain how it pecks away at my well-being, seeing this letter there, because it's something I need to do. And it's reminding me constantly that you've got to go and spend this money or you'll lose it. But then I never go and do it. But then I can't throw the letter away because I won't remember. And it's this constant cycle of torturous.
I have a similar thing with my bank account. My bank account comes with like a benefit, like a member benefit. And you have to choose every year whether you want, I can't remember. I think one of them is travel insurance. One of them is access to like, airline lounges at the airport. And the other one, I can't even remember what it was. There's like 3 you have to choose from. Gadget insurance, I think, is the other one. And you have to choose. And so like, it's just one of those life admin things. Maybe we need to do a whole episode on this. It's one of those life admin things where you're just like, I don't really care that much. Like, it's not in my front of my brain, it's really insignificant. But I've got my pile on my desk, or I've got many piles on my desk. Yeah. And I had the letter there from last year, and I put it there, and I never did anything with it. I never chose which benefit. So I think it just rolls over. Anyway, and then like a few days ago, I got another letter, and I realized the whole year had gone and I hadn't actioned it. And it's just, life admin, it gets you down.
I have these reminders of like, because I have an email subscriber list for being Fat Gay Vegan. And so all these emails I get about GDPR compliance and all this different stuff that I'm meant to do, and I just never do it. To the point where like my email, I can't log into my email on my phone anymore. And I think it's to do with I haven't made it compliant. My email account compliant. Right. And then I've got all these warnings every time I send an email newsletter out to people, like a subscriber email saying, you must do this. This is in breach of this. And I'm like, I don't know how to do it. It actually gives me anxiety. Like I don't know how to do stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's next week. Why don't we just have a whole episode about life admin?
That'll be fascinating.
Sounds really interesting. Actually, no, we won't do that.
Tune in when we talk about admin.
Well, let us know. We've got some subscribers. Let us know what your most loved or most hated life admin tasks are. I mean, I can think of like 20 off the top of my head, but yeah, let us know what yours are. Anyway, we should wrap up. So, Sean, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at fatgayvegan, and they can help support the charity that I work with, which is a vegan cooking school that runs free cooking classes and sends out meals to people in London. But we do global work as well, and that's called Made in Hackney, and you can go to madeinhackney.org.
Great. And if you want to find me or find my music, if you can just search for me at Josh and the Jumpstarts on Instagram or on Spotify. And you can also subscribe to this podcast on Spotify and on YouTube. So please do so you get notification when a new episode comes out every Tuesday. Until then, we'll put all of that in the show notes as well. But until then, stay safe and kick those Jehovah's Witnesses out of your building.
And everyone, for listening to this podcast, you need to go and say 12 Hail Marys to repent.
All right, we'll see you next week.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.